Good morning, everybody. Enter the stars and welcome to the show this morning. It's a Monday, and we are going to get into The Planet of the Apes, films 1 and 2. Now, first of all, when I saw Charlton Heston masked in film 1 for speaking out against the apes, I about lost it. Because this is exactly what we're going through right now. Now, there are a lot of other synchronicities and metaphors in this film that lead me to believe that this was a precursor to a very well planned agenda. Now, remember when I told you that these films were spin-offs from the real life polio simian virus outbreak of the 1960s? And how millions of people were infected through the polio vaccine, and many got cancer? Look at some of these papers on what happened with the polio vaccine of the 1960s. This is crazy. I'm going to flip through some of these because I could not believe this. Here they acknowledge it in this Wikipedia article, the contamination. Here's another paper on it. Now, some of these papers seek to minimize, but others conclude that in fact, millions of Americans were exposed, and many likely got cancer. Now, I'm going to be spelling some words, obviously, because we're now in the YouTube reality, and we got to be careful what we say, otherwise the work that we do will be censored. So this is why we spell things out. It's not because I think you guys are not smart. It's because of the state of affairs here on YouTube. Now, this particular paper talks about the results, conclusions, 30 years of follow-up. They are saying it's not associated, but yet it showed up in lab animals. But then other papers actually show that it actually did cause cancer. Here's a paper, 1955 through 63, millions of people exposed to the simian virus. And this paper concludes that in fact there was a link. Now, the paper we are going to focus on today is this one. Cancer risk associated with simian virus 40 contaminated polio vaccine. There may be an increased risk of incidence of certain cancers among 98 million persons exposed to the contaminated polio vaccine in the U.S. Further investigations are clearly justified. Now, why are we focused on this? Because they talk about where these cancers happened. And one of those places is called the Choroid Plexus. Now, to wrap your brain around this, pun fully intended in this instance, we had identified the choroid plexus in our body code series, for those of you that pay close attention. And this was several years ago. And what we found with the choroid plexus, the reason why we're looking at this is because it was a visual representation of the crown of thorns in the brain. The visual representation, here it is right here. You see Jesus in the middle. This is like his chest muscles, stomach muscles, his legs coming down, his arms outstretched. This is his head. His head becomes the pineal gland. And atop it is the choroid plexus, these rope-like red structures. It's like a string or like a crown. And what these do is create the cerebral spinal fluid. It is the well that never runs dry. Now, this is a microscopic view of the choroid plexus, and as you can see, it has a very thorny appearance. Here it is here in another view, and they show the ridges or thorns or crowns crowning Christ. Here's another microscopic view of it. Here's another view, the choroid plexus. It creates the cerebrospinal fluid, the well that never runs dry. Unbelievable. Now, the polio vaccines were grown inside monkey kidney cells, which made them susceptible to this simian virus in monkeys and in humans. And in the film, the virus appears in monkeys and humans, and it basically turns monkeys into humans and humans into monkeys. It has this like reverse effect in the film franchise. Now, let's go to this Planet of the Apes. This is crazy. Planet of the Apes sounds like POTUS, right? President of the United States. But instead of President of the United States, it's President of the Apes. Now, the original film released on 2/8, February 8th, and in the Hebrew year 28, which is 1968. And in the films that came after this, they actually go back in time. The apes go back in time to 1973. Well, 73 is the Hebrew year 33. So we've got all these crazy 28 and 33 synchronicities. Now, what is up with the 28? Well, it's got to mean 28 days. You know, the virus film and 28 days later. I mean, this is all about viruses, right? And what is 28 days? What does that really mean? Well, it's the cycle of sacrifice. And it actually also dovetails in with the 28 generations from David to Christ. Why did Christ say 14 and 14 generations from David to Christ, to himself? Well, it's because David slayed the giant. And when he cut Goliath's head off, he buried it in the very place that Jesus would be crucified, in the place of the skull, Golgotha. Now, you know the truth about the 28. Now, why did Jesus do that? Because he was the rebirth. And so a woman's 28-day cycle is the beast birth. And Jesus being born again, you're born in the spirit. You leave the beast body. You're under him, under the spirit. This is why he did this. And this is another example of the physiological evidence that they knew a whole lot more than we give them credit for in the New Testament. They knew about body physiology because Jesus was the Son of God. And he had this knowledge. He was the great physician, the true physician. And that's why at 12 years old, he fascinated doctors in a temple. And that was his first real miracle. Because he was the real doctor, the real physician, the real healer, to be hung on a pole. Right? And the fake doctor, the fake healer, is the caduceus, is the snake hung on a pole. Do you see now how all of this fits together? Now, the film was based, let me make sure we're connected. We'll keep going with this show. This is a crazy show. This will be a crazy show, you guys. So hang in there. And for those of you that are just coming on board, this is a show you will want to see all the way through. Now, looks like we're good to go. Just make sure. This is crazy. Now let's get back into these films. Now I'll put links to all this in the pinned comment. Because the book. Here's the novel right here. It's a French novel. Came out 58 years ago. 58 years ago. Well, next year, by January, it'll be 58 years. Came out in 63. In 2021 will be 58 years. Where have we heard that number before? We've heard the number 58 all over the place. And 58 years will pretty much mark, within a plus or minus a couple days or weeks, it'll mark the most prolific effort in human history, dwarfing the polio effort to vaccinate the entire world. Are you starting to understand what's happening here? 58 under the president. He will be president in 58 years after this novel came out. He will be the president still before January 20th. And that's why his 58 rooms at Mar-a-Lago and 58 stories in Trump Tower. And this is the 58th election. Do you see now? Or he won the 58th election. Do you see now what's happening? 1958 was the date in Quantum Leap in which Trump appears as a boy, a 12-year-old boy with his father in the taxi cab. 1958 Western about a guy named Trump who builds a wall. And the 58s go on and on and on. And here we are 58 years after Planet of the Apes. And we are living in the Planet of the Apes. So, what's up with this film? Well, it goes like this. Let me pull it up here in the wiki page again. We're going to look at the clips on this in a second. So, Charlton Heston is an Apollo astronaut. Have we heard that before? Do you know now why Trump has Apollo motif all over his 66th floor penthouse? If you're a little confused because you heard me say Trump Tower is 58 stories tall, it's because of the way he numbered it. He has a 66th floor penthouse in a 58-story building. Look it up. So, Charlton Heston is an Apollo astronaut, and he drives an arrow through time to what he thinks is another world. Now, let me start playing this montage so you can visualize what's happening here.
The scene from out here. Everything seems different.
Notice the VC subject matter. He injects himself as he talks about traveling through time. We've seen this theme over and over and over again. We saw it in 12 Monkeys. Something to do with disease and time travel. We're here. It's happening now.
Time bends. Space is boundless. That's about it.
So, in the Planet of the Apes, humans don't talk. And so, Heston starts talking, but they muzzle him because they don't want him to talk, because they can't believe it. That's what's happening to us right now. Now, Heston's in this arrow-like spacecraft. He's obviously a part of the Apollo mission, the astronauts, and he goes and they're exploring, but he ends up coming right back to Earth, except it's 2,000 years in the future. And now I want you to look at the date on his readout of when they landed. Watch. Actually, first, when polio vaccines were sent out, about 5 years before this film came out, they would hand them out in sugar cubes. So everything we talked about the sugar cubes and polio being related to this film is absolutely true. Here's a direct reference to it right here. Watch.
Well, and what do we want this morning? Do we want something? Come on, speak. Come on, speak. Do we want some sugar, old-timer?
So this is us, caged, quarantined, social distanced, waiting for our sugar cubes to get out. That's exactly what's happening right now. If we don't take our sugar cubes like a nice little human, we don't get to get out of our cages. We don't get to open up our businesses. We don't get to hug each other and watch each other as we pass away. We don't get to hold our babies. How did we get to this point, you guys? How?
Do we want some sugar, old-timer? Do we want some sugar? Some sugar, old-timer?
You could get hurt doing that, Doctor.
Oh, don't be silly. He's perfectly tame.
They're all tame until they take a chunk out of you.
Now, we all talked about the snake bite, the fangs of the serpent. That's why there are 2 VC shots. It's the iron fangs. Some of the technologies that they're looking at are made out of copper. That little patch, it's got fangs too. The pokes through your skin is made out of copper. And in this scene, Heston is running away from the apes. He's shot in the neck with a copper bullet. Brass is copper.
There's a life-size bronze statue of you standing out there somewhere.
Bronze is copper. That was a direct reference to the copper Sol Invictus, the Mithras cult statue of liberty. S-O-L. Sol. America worships Apollo and the sun. They don't worship the true Christ.
Well, it's probably turned green by now. Nobody can read the nameplate. But never let it be said that we forget our hero.
Until they take a chunk out of you. Until they take a chunk out of you. Until they take a chunk out of you.
Now, we are going to get into this later in the show. Apollo's Arrow. It's a book about CV. Someone sent this to me, and thank you for this. This just came out last month. Before this, we were talking about Apollo's Arrow in October. And there's the spacecraft that looks exactly like an arrow. Apollo's Arrow, and it passes through time. Now, this is Earth time.
Nothing scientific. It's purely personal. I leave the 20th century with no regrets. But one more thing. If anybody's listening, that is. Purely personal. If anybody's listening, that is.
Are we listening? This is purely personal. They tell you right here. This film came out in '68, I believe. Let's keep watching.
This beast has lost a lot of blood.
This place is dirty, Doctor.
Doctor, these animals are dirty. They stink, and they carry communicable diseases.
This is what they want us to feel like. We're dirty. We carry diseases. And so Heston finds this planet of apes where people have lost their ability to speak. And he's right back on Earth, but he doesn't realize it till the end of the film. And this really represents us. We are the muzzled humanity who can't speak our thoughts in fear of retribution, right? Here are the three monkeys on a council doing the hear no evil, see no evil, say no evil. It's a screenshot from the film. Here's Apollo's arrow. Here's a graphic that I did for the thumbnail showing the Hebrew year release and the date being 28. That's the date of sacrifice. So it's days and days later, right? From the Virus films that came out, obviously, decades after this one. Now, I want you to look at the date on the Earth time. The dates toggled through a bit. The last part you saw was a date of 11 something, but this date shows the 3, 2, and the 7. What is up with this number? Well, this number is the beast number. What are you talking about, Casey? You have 2, 3, and 7 ribs. You have 2 false floating ribs. You have 3 false ribs, and you have 7 fixed ribs. This is the beast number. This is why this number appeared on the door in the Shining film, because this is the beast number. This is your rib cage. What do you mean, Casey? Well, we are beasts, but we got to get back up into the spirit. We got to get back up into the 12 intracranial nerves with the Son of Man and God. It's all a visual representation. It's not really what it is. It's a visual representation. Be careful of some of these New Age channels, because they have some of this knowledge, but they try to repackage it to make it look like that Christ is actually like really just a figment of your imagination, or that the Bible was written after just an anatomy lesson. That's not what happened. God is the Alpha and Omega. He knew the beginning from the end, and he put it in the Bible as he instructed people who followed him in his will. So you actually became part of the body code. Some of these ancient patriarchs, because they followed the will of God, and the people that didn't follow the will, they became part of the body code too. It's the book of life. The book is the slices of the flesh. The book of life are the slices of the flesh written down in your flesh, the beginning from the end. And that's how you know who God is, because who else would know that? Only God, the creator of the universe. That is just crazy. Okay, let's keep going with this. So we saw the sugar cube. We saw the arrow piercing through time. Now, we've seen this piercing of the arrow through time before, have we not? Because the piercing arrow is actually the serpent. The serpent.
They're still dirty, Doctor. And the bite is septic. There, look at that.
The foundations of scientific brain surgery are being laid right here in studies of cerebral functions of these animals. He keeps trying to...
So, cerebral functions. Remember the transverse myelitis and the symptoms that they're finding in people when they were doing the testing of these vaccines? Remember this? And this is the same thing that you would see in a person who has rabies, which is the foundation of the whole zombie apocalypse lore. It's a rabies strain that causes neurological damage. Well, they're telling you right here.
Form words.
You know what they say, human see, human do.
It's a question of simian survival. To suggest that we can learn anything about the simian nature from a study of man is sheer nonsense.
Now, simian, of course, means monkey. And so they don't tell you in the film, but the simian furu is what caused this. What caused this, the monkeys turning humans, the humans turning into monkeys. Okay? You can find it in Planet of the Apes Wikipedia if you want to read about that. And so, this is what we're dealing with here. Now, these are some shots that we had already covered about Apollo's arrow before this guy wrote this silly book. And we're going to get into the book. There's actually a podcast a little bit later in this live decode. I'm going to try to squeeze that in today. But we were already talking about this. Remember Donnie Darko? See the arrowhead in the beads of the doorway? Do you see, in Donnie Darko compares time travel to a spear coming out of the chest? And then we heard one of the Baldwin brothers talk about Trump's favorite film is Donnie Darko. Remember? Is it all coming back to you? Now, what is this spear coming out of the chest? What is this all about? Well, I'll repeat it. Let's play this through because there's some other clips you need to see. This is from Stargate. Not Stargate, I'm sorry. This is from Battlestar Galactica. They find Apollo's arrow, and they travel through time after she puts the arrow in the bow. Let's keep watching. That's Trump's coat of arms. It's an arrow going through a cube. Mar-a-Lago. He just passed away. This guy, look at his shirt. He's holding an arrow. Scotland. He was the Highlander, the time traveler. Trump, his mother, was born 14 miles from the Callanish Standing Stones used for the Outlander series for time travel. And there is Trump, and he talked about being the tip of the spear, and in fact, he was the person pictured in his graduation photo. I think this is West Point. And there he is right there, the tip of the spear. And above him it says, men have passed through these portals. Still think I'm crazy? Do you still think the 80, 90,000 people on this channel are crazy? Of course we're not. We simply see past the lies. This is from Stargate. They had a serpent in the chest, and I'll explain to you what that means in a minute. Now it gets a little bit graphic here with the alien. Because from the Alien franchise, there was again a serpent in the chest. So they muzzle him up. What is the serpent in the chest? As far as we can tell, the serpent in the chest is the demonic spirits that are in our timeline eternal. They're not eternal, but on our timeline, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they will be here throughout the end until time ends. until a new heavens and a new earth is created by God, right? And so how do they jump through time? Well, they keep possessing things. Jesus threw them into pigs, but that wasn't the end of them. They probably jumped out of the pigs and into somebody else. What did Jesus do? He ran around basically doing exorcisms. That's what he did. So where are those spirits now? Well, they are the serpents, the fiery serpents, and they possess whatever they can. So what would be the easiest thing for them to possess? It would be a soulless body, a golem, a reanimated pharaoh, for instance, from ancient DNA, from some black goo that they found in a canopic jar, or a clone of somebody would be easy for them to possess. Someone of weak mind, without the Holy Spirit in their lamp. The eye is the lamp of the body. They want empty lamps so they can fill it with darkness. You see, and I'm starting to believe now that this V scene that's coming out will have something to do with that. Something to do with creating a ghost in the shell instead of the Holy Spirit in the shell. That's what I believe this arrow represents. It's the serpent. Apollo's arrow is the serpent. Let's keep watching this here. Now, in the sequel, which is Beneath the Planet of the Apes, another astronaut comes to try and find Charlton Heston. He comes in another arrow, so there's two arrows. There are your fangs. There's the serpent fangs, two arrows. Right? The two bites, the two V-scene shots. But then he gets stranded on the planet of the apes, just like Heston did.
Where are we? Well, in my opinion, Skipper, we've passed through a Hasline curve.
And before we ever saw this film, there's the telephone booth again. Why the telephone booth? Because it's copper telephone lines and copper core money. All of your money has copper at its core. It's 70 to 90% copper. Quarters, dimes, nickels. Pennies are only 2% copper. They're copper coated. But the rest of the coins are copper core. So interesting that Lincoln is on the penny, which has the least amount of copper. But he was the copper president, under which the transatlantic telegraph copper lines. There were 7 copper lines that went all the way across the ocean.
A bend in time. I don't know what planet we're on, but...
Now, after this new guy gets chased by the apes, he finds an underground city of advanced humans, and they use telepathy, and they worship the sun, and they worship the MOAB, which has an alpha and omega symbol on it. You're going to see it in a second. Of course, Apollo is the self-proclaimed alpha and omega, but he's the fake version, right? The Most High is the alpha and omega. He says it. I am the alpha and the omega. But in this film, they make it the mother of all BOMBS, the MOAB, right? So, alpha and omega is a reference to timelessness, eternal nature. And at the end of the film, the people underground, the advanced civilization of humans that can speak through telepathy, They use the BOMB to end the film, to reset time. The Great Reset. Keep watching here. Remember the time, all of the phone booths in time travel. Look at this. This is crazy. All of these people that we found. Look at Superman, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. All of it is phone booths. It's because of the copper. And we saw the Matrix even. And remember, we figured out that what Reeve meant. Reeve is a spiral that wraps around wire. It's called a Reeve. And that's why you have Kyle Reese from Terminator. This is why you have Christopher Reeves, Superman, that also traveled in time. We have Keanu Reeves, who was in the Matrix, that traveled through time. And we have George Reeve, the original Superman. And we have Paul Revere, the first coppersmith of America. Unreal. Now you'll notice this is the sequel. You remember in the first one I showed you, in Planet of the Apes, the original film, they crawl out of the arrow through what looks like an eye. It's basically the portal. That's how they escape. They evacuate the arrow as it's sinking in the water. Remember that scene? Well, here we are again. Instead, they go underground through another portal. That's a porthole. And this is where they find this advanced civilization. So this whole idea of portals and copper and Reeves, it's very real. We're just trying to piece it all together. But it's there. And there you saw the Alpha and Omega on the BOMB. It looks, they say it's made out of cobalt. It's a cobalt casing, but it does look very brass in its appearance, does it not? Lots of inverted crosses. Look at this. See this inverted cross here? Here you can see the Alpha and Omega symbol. Inverted crosses on the doors. That's Antichrist. And that's who Apollo really is, right? He's the Antichrist. This almost says 19 through 11. Weird on this here.
The heavens declare the glory of the bomb. And the firmament showeth his handiwork.
His sound is gone out unto all the lands.
Glory be.
Of course, they mention the firmament. They mention the sun going out. And that could be a reference to the 3 days of darkness.
To the bomb and to the holy fallout, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end.
And his light unto the end of the world.
So what they're doing is they're doing this ritual here because what's going to happen here? Well, the apes are basically trying to get down into the underground city. They discover the underground city and they're going to take this civilization out. So they figured, oh, we'll just launch the BOMB and be done with it. So they do this ritual before they set it off. But look at the pews. They form an arrow. Wow. Just like Trump in his photo. The portals.
On one of the fins, Greek letters. Alpha and
and Omega.
Then they're unmasked, right? Now, here's where things get creepy. Because the following year after this film, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Heston would go on to play the Omega Man. Remember that film that we decoded where there's this zombie apocalypse and Heston is the last man alive and he has to give his convalescent plasma to come up with a vaccine to save all of humanity and cure them of their zombie-like state. It's a zombie apocalypse. And Omega Man was the basis for the film I Am Legend with Will Smith. Weird, right? You guys, it's happening right now. Now, Moderna, let's pull that up. Oh, here, let's show you this here. Wait, where'd that go? Sorry, guys, I'm all over the place. Here. You guys saw the title of the show, and Moderna, which sounds like another word we won't say. This is what they're wanting to do. 100 million by the end of March. Is this what we want? They keep telling us people are going to have a choice. But then they also tell us that 90% of America needs to get this in order to have herd immunity. You guys, 90%, that's every adult of every age. The only person that leaves out are the children. So we're just sitting around like thinking that we have a choice, and we won't. This is what I've been trying to tell you guys, just like I warned you about Trump creating the VC. Oh, he won't make us take it. Was I not right about that? That the states will have all the power to take. He should have never made it. He should have never made it. And everybody was behind Trump saying, you're crazy. He's just making it. It's a choice. It's a choice. And you took him on his word. And now look at us. Here we are. And believe me, over the next several months, there will be pressure brought to bear. You will not be able to go certain places. You will not be able to restart your life unless you have it. Thanks, Trump. Your parting gift as you leave office, if in fact you are leaving. I don't know what's going to end up happening, but we will see, right? It doesn't matter who's in office. They're all the same. They all work together. And the quicker we figure that out, the quicker we can at least have a fighting chance. So, Heston played the Omega Man. I thought I had that pulled up. Oh, I guess I don't. Omega Man. Oh, he's probably back here. There it is. All right, here it is. This is Omega Man. Remember this? Heston. So, what would be the inference here? Well, using critical thinking, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the man becomes the end. He represents Apollo. Omega Man is Trump. He's Omega Man. The end of maybe all the presidents. I don't know that. But the end of the beginning of the end, basically. See, it even says here, I Am Legend adaptation. Will Smith, 2007. This is crazy. Okay, so this is all very strange. So let's keep going with this. There's more to this. Play this out. And I'm not going to play this whole montage because there's a part in here at the end of this montage that I released yesterday that we talk all about Lyme and the center of where that started in the 1970s outbreak in Wisconsin. And it seemed to start, or possibly start, in this primate research center. So if you're interested in that and you did not see yesterday's show, you can check that out. But this video goes on for another 30 minutes. But let's finish out this decode here with number 2. Now I cut that part out because I didn't want you guys to have those nasty faces stuck in your mind. Let's keep going.
He descendeth from the outermost part of heaven, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof.
What? The doomsday bomb. My God.
So that's where we're not going to get into all this because this is long. But I will link this in the pinned comment. Now, to finish up today's show, this is the final nail in the coffin. It's a book that released in November called Apollo's Arrow: The Profound and Enduring Impact of the CV. Now, they did a podcast, and we're going to look at some excerpts from that podcast. Here it is right here. Let's take a look at this. We're going to skip around. I'm not going to play the whole podcast. We're going to start at 4 minutes. They admit that this has never been used in humans.
Or maybe more trials in so-called phase 3. These 2 trials for which the interim results have been released are both so-called RNA vaccines. They're a new technology for use in humans. Neither, to my knowledge, I don't think RNA vaccines have ever been used in humans before.
So we are the guinea pigs. Now at 5:15 into this, he asked that since they are new, do we have to worry? Right? That question should have been asked before they made these things.
To my knowledge, I don't think RNA vaccines have ever been used in humans before. The Pfizer and the Moderna are the 2. They soon, the Fun and Moderna trial, and their vaccine worked in reducing the incidence of COVID infection, not to 0 among the vaccinated, and that's important. The vaccines were not perfect, but substantially reduced the risk of getting COVID by 90 or 95%, which is great news. However,
RNA vaccines are new, though, Nicholas. Does that mean we have to worry about the potential health effects of using that kind of technology?
Well, we don't know. Yes, but more generally, we don't know.
Oh, just no big deal. No big deal. Everything's fine. Now, in this next part, he admits that in a small trial like this, we won't see the mortality rate of the vaccine until it's rolled out to millions of people. Listen to this part. Let's get to it. $6.20.
Subtle point. We wouldn't necessarily notice it in a trial of 30 or 40,000 people. And it's not until we start rolling it out to millions of people that we begin to see potentially some of the safety problems, if there are any. There's also a very subtle point, and I don't want to be Mr. Doom and Gloom, so I'm just trying. As most people listening probably already know, this virus has a very interesting property, which as a parent makes me very happy, which is that it tends to spare the young. So I have 20-year-old children.
It doesn't tend to spare the young. It's like literally 1,000% less harmful to the young. Not tends to spare the young. See, this he's massaging his words here. Now, at 10 minutes and 30 seconds, he tries to justify basically giving a vaccine to every man, woman, and child in America. Because he says that older people who are most susceptible, who we would think would be the only ones who would need something like this, he says they're at the end of the transmission chain. That, the real problem is everybody's carrying this, and that's the real problem. So everybody needs to be vaccinated.
Children. I have also a 10-year-old child. My wife and I have 4 children. And I'm so relieved that I don't have to worry that even though I might get sick and die, at least I don't have to worry about my children. So if you're like in your 20s and you get sick from this virus, you might have a 1 in 3,000 to 1 in 5,000 chance of death, let's say. If you're in your 50s, you might have a 1 out of 100 or 1.5 out of 100 chance of dying. And if you're in your late 70s or 80, you might have a 1 in 5 chance of dying if you get this vaccine. So it has this backward L-shaped. If you put age on the x-axis and mortality on the y-axis, the virus has this backward L-shaped curve. Now, so you rightly might say, well, if we have a vaccine available, we should give it to elderly people, which is a very sensible thing to say, to give it to elderly people. I don't know why the light has, to give it to elderly people. But the thing about the elderly is they are at the end of the transmission chain of the virus. In other words, while from the point of view of an individual, it makes sense to allocate the vaccine preferentially to the elderly, the people who are transmitting the virus are working age adults, people who are out and about. And in fact, it might make more sense. You might save more lives from a public health point of view, giving the vaccine to people who are at low risk of death, like in 20 to 40, for example.
Makes absolutely no sense. Okay, so of course, this is our opinion. Now, at 12 minutes and 30 seconds, he shows his book, right? And this literally is, they show Apollo's arrow on this book. Let's go to that part.
Important that people did, my 20 to get infected, because if he does get infected, it substantially increases his low probability of death. So I don't think it's wise for us to frame this as the young don't have to worry. I mean, the young generally don't have to worry about dying, and you certainly don't want to get a deadly germ if you don't have to.
I'm holding up Nicholas's wonderful.
I mean, are you kidding me? Now, he goes on later, and we'll play that part a little bit later in this podcast. He describes the virus as the Apollo's arrow, exactly what we've been saying for about 6 months now. Now, let's go to 15 minutes in this, and this is where we need to fact check this guy, because he actually lies right here, based on their own numbers, not based on our numbers, based on
very bad pathogens. It's so intrinsic lethality. The virus is it's a bad germ. SARS-CoV-2 is a bad germ. It's 10 times more lethal than the flu.
He says it's 10 times more lethal than the flu. Furu. The official report, as we know, is that what they're telling us is that 300,000 more people basically have died from CV-19 than normally die in a year. And if we look at the total number of people that die in America, just in general, it's 2.8 million. And the definition of what really constitutes a CV-19 death and what doesn't, I believe, is still up for debate, because they're pinning these deaths on things that aren't really related to it. So, in my opinion, the 300,000 number is a very soft number. Now, fact checkers will tell you that there's this C to the D to the C data, and that it's still coming out, and we don't really know until 2021 what the actual death rate is. And that's really convenient, isn't it? Because they've already implemented everything they need to implement. If we had real-time data, day-to-day data, we would be able to make better decisions, but we don't. It's always delayed 2 to 6 months. But according to their claims about the 300,000 excess deaths, the number of people who they eventually end up saying died in 2021, when we get those numbers, it should be well over 3 million total. Right? Instead of 2.8 million people that normally die every year in America, it should be closer to 3 million when the final numbers come out. And this is what we'll be keeping an eye on. But I had to fact check this guy, because here's 2017, 2018 data for number of flu deaths is 61,000. The last time I checked, 61 times 10 times the amount, would be 600,000, and we're not there. We're not anywhere close. We're about half that. So he basically lied by 5 times. Now, you can use other years as the rate of flu, people that die from the flu. Some years it's like 30,000. Some years it's 60,000. But if he's going to quote a statistic like that, he needs to be using the higher numbers, not the lowball number, to make it look so much more scary. I mean, this guy is fear, fear, fear. He's the guy that wrote the book Apollo's Arrow. So, I believe what they've done is they've tacked on these extra numbers of people and how they died, and they've just attributed it to CV19. We already know the testing is not good. We already know it's false positive and negatives. We also know that if a person, for instance, got pneumonia and they tested positive, that they would call that a CV19 death, even though it might have not had anything to do with it. Now, here's the normal mortality rate for people 65 and older. It's a little over 2 million. They represent most of the people that die every year in America. But the total death rate is 2.8 million. What's this? Now, of course, they've been fact-checking this whole thing about, because somebody came out and somebody from the CDC basically found that there were no more additional deaths in the senior age group than there were in previous years. And of course, the fact checkers come out and say, oh, the numbers aren't in yet. Oh, that's just convenient, isn't it? Because then they can just tack on whatever they want. Now that they're busted, oh, we'll just pump those numbers up a little bit more. Let's test a whole lot more people and make sure that we tack on the cause of death as CV19 so we can get our numbers to prove to everybody, once 2020 is all said and done, that well over 3 million people died and 300 to 500,000 of those were from CV19. So the fact checkers are out in full force on this. Now, let's get back to this podcast. I hope that all made sense. Let's go to 17 minutes into this. I should probably make sure we're connected, right? Let's do that. We'll come back to this. Welcome to the show, everybody. All right, let's keep going. 17 minutes. He says CV19 is not as bad as 1918 Furu, right? You guys, it's not even close. But listen to how he says this. Because if you're listening to it, you're going to think that it was close to the number of people that got taken out in 1918. It wasn't even it's not even close as spamdemics go. Let's listen to him run his mouth. Sorry guys, I'm just irritated.
Which no one remembers because it wasn't very you had the 1957 pandemic, and further down here, below people, it had the highest attack rate and the highest dead. Down below that, over here in the middle somewhere, you had the 1957 pandemic, and further down here you had the 68 and the 2009 H1N1 pandemic, which no one remembers because it wasn't very deadly. You got the cold, and it was a global pandemic, but it wasn't very deadly, and various other pandemics from the 70s and so on. So this coronavirus pandemic is going to be above the 1957 pandemic, but not as bad as the 1918. It is going to wind up killing more people. It's already killed, 240,000 Americans that we know of. Probably 300,000 have died. Excess deaths arose from this. Ultimately, I think at least before the epidemic is fully over in a couple of years, at least 500,000 Americans and as many as 1 million Americans are going to die of this condition.
He says die about 50 times in this presentation. This is definitely made to be about fear. Now he's going to compare it to Apollo 0. Listen.
So that's bad, but not as bad as 1918.
Yeah. You end the book, Nicholas, on a hopeful note, and as you said, you don't want to be all doom and gloom, and the book is not all doom and gloom. I'll read the concluding paragraph. This won't be a spoiler. It is still a book worth reading, even if you skip ahead and peek right at the end. Professor Christakis says, microbes have shaped our evolutionary trajectory since the origin of our species. Epidemics have done so for many thousands of years. Like the myth of Apollo's arrows, they've been a part of our story all along. We have outlived them before, using the biological and social tools at our disposal. Life will return to normal. Plagues always end. And like plagues, hope is an enduring part of the human condition.
Hogwash.
And very Twitter thread, right, Nicholas? Yeah, useful thing. View consequences, pain, Nicholas.
Are not at the beginning of the end of this pandemic. We're just at the end of the beginning. I mean, we've just finished the opening act. This virus is going to have a field day with us. There's a debate about whether viruses are living things or not, but for this,
he admits that there's a debate still out about whether or not that viruses are living things. Now, 21 minutes, he's going to blame non-compliance in the summer. Oh, us bad, filthy human beings went out in the summer to enjoy the 4th of July, and this is the reason for the second wave. And the rest of this, I'm not going to play much more of this. It's going to give you a synopsis, and I'll link it. But basically, we're bad, gross, dirty humans.
For the sake of argument, it's acting like any other living thing. It's having an ecological release, have no affected, so we're only a fourth of the way there.
How about a strong, healthy immune system that doesn't react to viruses, the non-living things? How about that? How about they start talking about healthy eating? How about they start, if you want to try to address this, how about not promoting drive-through fast food, but how about you come up with a new chain of drive-thrus that is all healthy organic food? How about that? How about talking to people about vitamin C and getting plenty of rest and reducing stress in your life and exercise? Nowhere in the C to the D to the C or this guy's, no one's talking about that. That is how you beat viruses, non-living things. They're simply there to tell you that you're not taking care of your body. That's what they're there for. Let's keep watching.
This virus is going to keep spreading and spreading and spreading and killing us at will, indiscriminately. I mean, it doesn't...
Kill. Right. Unbelievable. Now, let's go to 21 here. Sorry, guys. I just get so upset about this.
Baseline, the second wave. And as we can see, I think yesterday there were 1,400 deaths or something in the United States. We're above 1,000 deaths a day from this condition. Hospitals are at full capacity in many Midwestern states. The Dakotas have the highest per capita death rate of any place on the planet right now, or ever. The Dakotas do. Minnesota is inundated. Parts of Utah, parts of Texas, parts of Oklahoma, California. It is a dire situation, and we're just beginning this. I mean, I think Americans. This is the problem with exponential growth, and why I'm also so disgusted with so many of our political leaders. That it is the role of leadership to help people to see the situation as it is, not as they wish it to be. So the thing about exponential growth is you can be deluded into thinking the situation is not so bad. The experts are saying, badness is about to happen, and you look around and you say,
I want to get to the part where he talks about blaming the 4th of July. This is crazy. This is the Apollo's arrow. This is okay.
Century that haven't come in waves, and as forecast by everyone back in January, every expert back in January, the second wave is now upon us, and we've made it worse by our bad behavior over the summer, because it's starting at a very high baseline, the second wave. And
oh, you bad humans. Okay, so the rest of this is really fear. He talks about overrun hospitals that aren't overrun at all. Because if one hospital is full, you just simply go to the next one 20 miles down the road, right? There's a lot of empty hospitals. So for them to make us feel like the hospitals are just being overrun is just retarded. He then compares us to children, not accepting the truth. Yet they're the ones trying to treat us like children by trying to make our own health decisions for us. You can't force someone you can't force your opinion on someone about health decisions. That's always a choice. Always. Unless you don't have your mental faculties, or for some reason they think that you can't make your own choice because of some, disability where you're mentally disabled or something. We always have had the power of what happens to our body. A doctor is only supposed to be a consultant, not some kind of boss of our health and our bodies. So they're the ones trying to treat us like children. And of course, he brings in climate change and overpopulation, which is just ridiculous on its face. He's saying that we're encroaching on animal habitats, and that's what's infecting us. I mean, because of overpopulation. He even describes bats as basically winged viruses. That they're the one creature that is so virulent and it's got wings so it can get to more people. I mean, this is so ridiculous, it's not even funny. So, what else does he talk about in here? He was all about these draconian measures, laws, mandates across every state. And he says that there will be permanent changes because of this, which is what we tried to tell you guys. If we go down this road, things will never go back to normal. And this is what he spews. He tries to basically compare what happened with some of the earlier infectious diseases in American history in the 1900s, where they had spittoons, they're called, where people would spit in this can when they would go into hotels and restaurants. And he said that they got rid of those and they're never coming back. And he tries to compare that to all the changes we've had to make in our lives because of this. The two don't even compare. And they were never forced to get rid of those. Their business licenses weren't threatened. I think people just realized that they just didn't want. It's like not allowed. Well, that's a whole nother subject. So what this really is, in my opinion, is a slow burn to tank the economy. He even talks about CV might cause a change in women's equality in wages. He talks about that. Like basically getting women in fear and getting them scared. Oh, things are going to go back to the way they were in the 60s. And the gall of these people, this guy right here admits that the professional class was untouched compared to the working class because we can Zoom for our jobs. We can do our jobs online. But then they basically fake sympathy for the blue collar workers. They don't have a choice. We should be glad. We're so blessed that we get to go and do our stuff online. But the poor blue collar workers, as they're threatening the blue collar workers and taking and shutting down businesses. And of course, later he talks about herd immunity. And here's my stance on that. Okay, as we begin to, this is one of the longer shows. I want to make sure we got all this in. Here's my stance on herd immunity. Guess what? Oh, this thing is so virulent. It's everywhere. It's on all the surfaces. If you don't wear a mask or social distance, you're a carrier. So, okay, good. That means we're all covered. We already have herd immunity because we've already been exposed to it, right? If you didn't wear a mask and didn't social distance, you probably already got it. So guess what? When they come knocking on our doors or try to force us or try to say, oh, no, you can't. Unless you get the VC, guess what? I'll just say I've already been exposed. According to their science, we're already immune. We should never be forced to take anything. That's the bottom line. And that's the end of the show today, you guys. Love each and every one of you. Be saved if you haven't already. And take care. We'll be back on here tomorrow with a memorial show for Brandy Vaughn, who, for her stance in her fight, lost her life. I met Brandy back in 2003 when we were both fast asleep working in the pharmaceutical industry. And I'm going to share that story with you and the memorial of her life. We actually interviewed her once here on this channel, actually. It's in my unlisted videos. We came under electronic attack. So you're only going to hear her for about the first 10 minutes. And then basically exactly what she said was happening in her very own life. Being targeted individual actually happened during the show. And you could not hear the majority of the show. But I'll put it in the pinned comment of that live show tomorrow so that you guys could at least hear some of her words. It's just, I can't even believe the life we're living in right now. I cannot believe it. I love each and every one of you.